I'm Christina, astrology coach at Heart Horizon Astrology and host of Astrology with Heart. This is episode 10. So I want to talk about the annular eclipse we have coming up. Annular eclipse is just a fancy word for saying partial eclipse. It's coming up in Aquarius. It will be at 28 degrees and 49 minutes, and it will happen on the 17th of February at 12 midday in GMT. So I'm based in England. If you are not, then please adjust for your location. So for this podcast, it would be a great idea if you have it, your chart to hand. If you don't have your astrology chart and you would like one, you can go to my website, you can create one there. You need your date of birth, place of birth, and your exact time, or as close as you can. And that will really help you as we're going through these podcasts or when you're reading the blog posts. So I want you for this new moon to keep an eye on between 24 and 29 degrees of the fixed signs. That's Aquarius, Scorpio, Leo and Taurus, and between about 1 and 3 of the next sign, which is the mutable signs, Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius and Gemini, because this is where all the action will be happening. So what do we know about the sign of Aquarius? Well, they're known as the zodiac weirdos, the iconoclasts, the radicalists. They're the ones into science and robotics, and they're highly cerebral, highly intellectual. They're also pretty stubborn and like their own way of doing things, and so we tend to have a phrase like walk to the beat of their own drum. I have my sun in the 11th house, which is the house of Aquarius, so it acts quite a lot like a Aquarian sun. And I know that I definitely have all of those traits. So I hope I'm in good company. And I see now that with Pluto moved into Aquarius, we're going to have quite a generation of Pluto and Aquarius people. Okie dokie. So the energy is cool. It's cerebral. It's mental. It's air energy. It's associated with electricity and electric current. And so you tend to find Aquarian people quite sparky. They're very ideas-led, very intellectually creative. And they tend to favor the collective over the personal. What do I mean by that? Well, there's more of an interest in humanity as a whole. So humanity as a whole, so the idea of equality in the world, there's definitely an idealistic vision or a visionary of Aquarius that kind of wonders, well, why are we fighting? Why are we got people up here and people down here and people with lots of money and people with no money? Why can't everyone have access? Why can't everyone be free to choose? Why can't everyone have shoes on their feet and money in their pocket and be able to choose things like their religion, for example? This would be in Aquarius's mind because it's very much about fairness and equality. Aquarius is also the sign of groups, communities, networks. So in the last podcast, in my last blog post, I spoke about the full moon that happened and the axis between Leo and Aquarius. And with Leo, the very kind of egocentric need to solely create, and Aquarius about sharing that creation with everybody in a group situation. Due to Aquarius being quite cerebral, it tends to have these intellectual downloads. We call them like lightning strikes. Every now and then there'll be like this ping and you go, oh, that just made so much sense to me. And tends to think a lot in kind of visual prototypes and is very much an experimental sign. I always find this funny with Aquarius, though. It's quite conflictive. It's quite controversial as a sign. This comes out in a lot of ways. And one of them, which I think is so funny, is loving to observe people and be quite friendly and quite good in social settings, yet kind of at the same time hate them or almost be outside of it. Imagine like this social sphere, or you're at an event and you're in this bubble. Well, Aquarians kind of take themselves outside of the bubble and they watch people. How does this happen? How do people interact? Looking at the body language, looking at people's faces, getting a sense of this patterning. So Aquarius is, even though it's there, it's not quite in it, it's almost outside of it. And this also leads into this, I said right at the beginning about being the weirdos and the iconoclasts, that Aquarius likes to be unique, likes to be different. And at the extreme or excessive end of that can be very shocking. So if you've been out and about and you've seen somebody dress up absolutely wild that gains a lot of attention, that's almost like Aquarius in many senses. It likes to be the odd one out. And going back to this controversy, also likes to be part of the group, like I need to find my tribe. So it's a totally wild, totally controversial sign, but a lot of fun because you never quite know what's going to happen, right? There's a lot of tricks and surprises that happen with Aquarius, and they're very sudden and they pivot a lot and they get these intellectual thoughts and they change their minds. And so, there's not that fixed ability that you get with Taurus. That doesn't happen in Aquarius despite it being a fixed sign. It tends to be more representative of instability. Another thing of note with Aquarius, and I like to do my three kind of main key points with them. I mean, one of them is freedom, or freedom stroke liberation. And we might say, well, freedom and liberation from what? Well, in astrology, we look at it as in Saturn is the principle that maintains tradition, it maintains the container, it crystallizes. And that Uranus in response, Aquarius Uranus in response, wants to break out of those monotonous patterns or things that have crystallized beyond their usefulness. So when the form now doesn't fit, or when it's become staid, overly crystallized, can't move, no flexibility with it, Uranus comes in and it kind of shatters it almost. It questions it. And it questions it with this very kind of intellectual, almost free thinking energy. Because what can commonly happen in a Saturnian archetype is that things will plod on and stay the way they are. So why are we changing them? They've always worked, let them continue. And Aquarius comes in and says, well, you could do this differently, or that doesn't really work very well, or, I think I found a way of doing that better, or why don't you add in some technology, or why don't you bring in more minds to think about it this way? And so it's always coming in and kind of prodding and almost antagonizing a lot in that very free mind that isn't restricted by how things are. It's more about the freedom of how things can be, and so there's lots of possibilities and viewpoints. What do I put in my notes? Oh yes, can be ruthlessly honest about social structures that no longer serve. Exactly that. So there's a detachment, and I've had a lot of run-ins with people online about this word, don't like this word. And me being quite Aquarius, I never have a word that I don't like. I more have to think about what that word really means. I want to dismantle that word. And detachment. So there's a connectiveness and there's an ability to separate from something, yeah? And when we connect to something, yes, we're very close to it, but we can also be very absorbed by it. We can become emotionally involved by it, and that almost restricts us because we become dependable on it, very needful of it, and we don't want to move from that space. But with Aquarius, it can detach from all of those things. It can be completely separate, completely independent in its own mind and its own actions. And this allows it to think independently. And so when I dismantle it like that, it's actually it's quite a useful energy to have. However, it's probably not an easy one if you're surrounded by other people that are a lot more perhaps emotive and not so cerebral and are not really as kind of logically minded and have that ability as Aquarius does. So at its very, very best, Aquarius is a visionary. It can turn radical ideas into very practical networks. It can build communities around shared values. Values is a huge word you'll hear with Aquarius. And usually when Aquarius is choosing people to hang out with, picking their tribe, they're going to pick people that have similar values. And we can kind of feed that in a very holistic and very broad sense into this humanitarian vision that Aquarius has. You know, I want to see this better world. I want to see a place where everyone has a decent life. That's my vision. And if someone else comes along and says, you know what, that's my vision as well, and here's what I think about us getting there, Aquarius loves that. Sorry for dancing around if you're watching this video. I don't have a chair and it's really hurting my knees. All right. So another area of Aquarius that is definitely worth mentioning is authenticity. Yeah? You ever heard someone chuck around the phrase, well, I am who I am. This is who I am. I'm just being who I am. You know, what does that even mean? Well, Aquarius is very good at that authenticity that is outside of culture, outside of religion, outside of these layers of social construct, right? Because we don't always realize how they shape us. You know, where we're born in the world, the kind of family that we're born into, the way that we grow up, the views and the experiences from people around us, like our family and our friends, the schools that we go to, all of it shapes us, and all of it conditions who we are. And so Aquarius asks the question, without all of this social construct, without all of this social conditioning, who am I? And so it can tend to explore and experiment and shock and distance as a way of figuring out who it actually is without all of this. And that kind of disconnect comes into play really well here. It allows it to disengage from those and to ask those questions. So if you do happen to have your natal chart, please do take a look at where Uranus is falling in your chart, where it's going to be at this new moon. And also take a look at where it is in your chart natally. Where is it always? Okay. And take a look at where Aquarius sits. So is it on the cusp of one of the houses? Is it intercepted? Maybe it's in the middle of the house. That will give you a sense of where Aquarian energy can be felt in your life. So if it's in your second house, like it is for me, it might impact on the way that you make money. And you may see your Aquarian qualities as part of your resources. We talk about finances, we talk about, things like crypto and Bitcoin, which are very Aquarius. Personally, I'm not into them, but that would be one area where you could see it in the second house. If it's in your seventh house, you could be drawn to relationships with other Aquarians, so drawing your tribe, or you could be drawn into romantic relationships which are quite non-traditional. They could be major age gaps, long distance, one partner travels the 3 or 4 months of the year, polyamorous, so you could have multiple partners, you could have one main partner and various partners. Whatever is non-mainstream and non-traditional I've got a cat in the background. There's always a cat. That would be very, very Aquarian. Is it in your third house? Maybe you're a very eccentric kind of thinker. Maybe these insights are real spark you all the time. Maybe you're a big ideas person and very experimental that way. Maybe you're scientific, get an idea and you want to try it out. Third house is also linked to social media. So maybe you're somebody that's very prominent on social media channels. Or maybe you get involved in lots of different groups, or there'd be physical groups, or probably more likely digital groups with Aquarius, perhaps with an unusual interest. Or could it be in house 10? So I actually have my Uranus in house 10. I have Aquarius on the cusp of the second. And in the 10th, we're known as the society game changers, with the people that challenge all of those societal constructs, because this is the house of Saturn, right? So this is, I said earlier on about Uranus kind of facing it off with Saturn. In this house, it really does it. There's a lot of, well, why am I doing it that way? Well, as my dad always says to me, Tina, that's the way it is. And I'm like, no, it's not the way it has to be. Another shadow of Aquarius is very rigid ideology. So I said earlier about the humanitarian vision, and it's a beautiful vision to have. But Aquarius feels that the vision is kind of a promise that it can happen. And then the reality hits is where it doesn't quite happen, that people have different agendas going on, and it just doesn't come to fruition exactly as it's seen. So there can be almost this dogmatic attachment to these kind of visions. Apologies, my cats are running around. So it can see a world of equality, but, maybe a world where no one is starving and everybody is financially comfortable, but, it's not always great at not being instrumental in that, as in allowing it to kind of create as well. The Aquarian attachment to novelty and new things and being very typical early adopters, they can get very, very involved in novelty and not always be as comfortable with things beyond that novelty stage. I mean, obviously, everything that we, are literally just exposed to is new, and this is different, this is new. And then it's going to become, sure, it's the norm now. So, it's always having to find a sense of new in it is the best scenario, but sometimes Aquarian can just be jumping to every new thing and then getting very bored of it. Another one to note here on the shadow side is Aquarius being what is known as the sword of truth, and they can really weaponize that truth in their urgency to expose different systems, and we've seen that in the world too. Different whistleblowers that have come out, can be kind of public shaming or radicalization happening, or even a sense of kind of moral superiority. On over to the chart now, and I'm just going to put it on the forward chart for the minute. So this is 17th of February, the Annular Eclipse at 28:49 of Aquarius. So you can see the sun and moon there in conjunction in that kind of top right quadrant. And you can also see, if you just look near it, we've got Venus there at 8 degrees of Pisces in a conjunction to the North Node in Pisces. And then we've also got Mercury there at 16 degrees of Pisces. So we've got quite a kind of a water influence as well now. And whenever we see planets in conjunction to the North Node, then these planets are having an impact on our kind of collective evolution, so how we're moving forward. So at a collective level now, with Venus and Mercury there, in general, we might not have the clarity that we would hope for. Pisces has a tendency to cast kind of like a veil over things. It can either give them a very soft hue, as in, if you know the phrase, rose-tinted glasses. So we don't quite see things as they are, or it can cause us to feel that everything is okay and be really, really aware of what's actually happening. So disillusionment can take place. Now, in this case, we're not really seeing any major aspects that are significant. There's a trine to Jupiter, but that's kind of a nice flow. So I think with this one, I think right at this time we've got some opportunities at play. We've got an opportunity to not carry so much baggage. And when I say that, I mean release. Not in the kind of kill-off way that we might release with Pluto, more in a way that we realize that something can dissolve. So Pisces has the energy of dissolving. So, is there anything right now, especially that we're holding romantically, that we're holding in our minds, that we can let go of, that we can allow to dissolve, that we can send love and forgiveness out there, that we can be a lot more compassionate with, whether that's for ourselves or in relation to others. So just to keep that in mind too. I'm just going to click on the moon here and just to see very, very cleanly the aspects, and you can note that there's pretty much just one happening, and it's quite a big one because we've got its ruler Uranus, who's only been newly direct in Taurus the last couple of weeks, in a square. And basically it's the tail end of Taurus now, 27. It will go through Taurus and it will move into Gemini, and it won't go back into Taurus. So this is kind of the last few degrees, the last leg of this whatever this narrative is. Whenever we see new moon in Aquarius with a square to its ruler like this, we know that squares can be a challenge. They can be difficult to manage. There can be some kind of conflict that's happening. For me, when I see Uranus to this extent, I think probably something that's going to be quite shocking. And with the link to the nervous system, probably something that could really knock our nervous systems and take us a while to recover. So, Uranus and Taurus, well, Taurus is the sign of grounding, it's the sign of the earth, it's the sign of security, stability, what we build for ourselves, whether internally, i.e. our self-worth and self-respect, or externally, but still for ourselves, like the money that we have, the possessions that we have, houses that we buy. It's very tangible and physical as a sign. So this is like, I always call it Bob the Builder, Taurus. Literally the Taurians are the builders of the zodiac. And so, this says to me, this is something that is built, but it might not be as stable as we thought it was. With that Pisces energy as well, there can be a little haziness. I'm not quite sure if it is, maybe it isn't. Some questioning going on, especially with Mercury and Pisces. But to me, this challenging square is probably going to bring things to a little bit of a head. And we do find with Uranus that there can be I like to call it the change or cut off. So something significant has to change here, whether it changes and I don't choose it. So that's going to be the shock to the nervous system, or whether I choose this change and I know it's going to be radical, I know it's going to be crazy, but it needs to happen, or I need to cut off from it. So it's not a death as such, it's more I need to disassociate myself with it. And that's why it does tend to bring things to a head. I know for me, many years ago, I was in a long-term relationship and Uranus just hit and everything was fine. And literally one day he was gone. It was totally destabilizing for my nervous system. Actually, the shock of it probably took me over a year to kind of get used to the fact that the significant change had happened. And so they can be like that. But I think awareness, I think being aware that this energy is taking place can mean that we can have some kind of mental preparation, and also, move ourselves towards a positive. So the choice making. And so, does something need to change? And if it does need to change, can you consciously change it? Can you be the action taker? So let's also consider the fact that these are both in fixed signs. You've got Aquarius in fixed air, and you've got Uranus in fixed earth. And Taurus as an archetype is very slow and steady and patient. Things are built bit by bit by bit, and they're kind of tested for stability at each stage in the process. So Taurus doesn't like to be rushed. It's a slow energy. It's a slow, steady, even energy. Aquarius is, as soon as it gets a little download, it pivots and there's something shocking happens. It's very disruptive energy. And so the two of them don't really play very well together. But sometimes in life, change has to happen to move us forward. Sometimes it can happen in a way where we question why it happens, but at other times, and I know with me personally, when things have happened, I've seen sometime later the kind of benefit from the change. So yes. As always, I like to finish up with one ritual and a few reflection questions. So let's do the reflection questions first. Let's see, what have we got? Where do I prioritize belonging over individuality, and where do I need to reclaim my voice? What small experiment could I run now that would test a new way of relating or working with others? Well, this one is brilliant. What truth am I avoiding because it would disrupt the group I belong to? You can read that one as in not having the group. What truth am I avoiding just by itself in any situation? And really look at where this new moon is in your chart right now. Is it a truth that you're avoiding about your financial situation, or about your career, or about your relationship, or about your home and family life? And then let's just do one ritual. And just to let you know, there are tons of other rituals and a few more questions on the blog post too, with the link below. So this one I really liked. It's called the Micro Experiment Launch. And it basically says just design a 1-week experiment that tests a new way of relating. So it could be something shared, it could be rotating a leadership role, it could be a volunteering project. So all of these are very Aquarian as well. And just toying with something completely novel, completely new, just maybe 1 week or maybe 1 month or a couple of months, a short period of time, and gain yourself some feedback. And keep a journal. If you don't have one already, they're always great and handy, especially with an intellectual sign. Write down how you felt about that practice. What was the experiment like? Who did you meet? What did you do? What did you learn? So there's plenty more on the blog post if you like to read those. Thanks again for listening in. I really do appreciate it. All the links that I've mentioned are below, so you don't have to search for them. They're right there. Please feel free to comment, share, or come find me. I'm on Instagram and I'm on TikTok as well. Whatever feels good for you. And I will see you in a few weeks.